I thought that making a video about Mario would make me seem like a bit of a sad man-child, so I thought that getting into character would help a bit. It's just made it a bit more awkward, to be honest. Fuck it, just get on with the video.
So then, how many of you out there have heard of Mario? You know, the portly plumber, the almighty mascot of Nintendo, the mustachioed mushroom-munching maestro. Well, with sales figures totaling over 800 million units, I'd imagine a vast majority of you, even if you've only ever played one video game in your life, there's a good chance that Mario features in it in some manner. The Mario franchise has an incredibly long history of delivering top-selling games that span a range of genres, meaning that there's something for everybody to enjoy regardless of their age or interests. Like, I'm pretty sure I could convince my uncle to play a Mario game if I showed him one with a golf club on the cover. But I think the main reason for its success is that the Mario franchise represents the video game medium in its absolute purest form. Every Mario title and subseries is built on a very basic foundation. Get from A to B and avoid enemies, have a poke around a level to find a MacGuffin, race against your friends in go-karts, play against your friends in tennis, cure somebody of their illness by jamming pills down their throat. You know what, I take it back, this is pretty fucked up.
Okay, so my basic point is that rather than forcing themselves to innovate with every single entry, each Mario subseries has instead focused on refining their respective formula to absolute perfection. You always know exactly what you're getting yourself into with every game in the series, and they always deliver in terms of top quality gameplay. And guys, I love this franchise.
I got into the franchise around the DS era with titles like New Super Mario Bros, Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, Super Mario 64 DS, and Mario Kart DS, all being titles that I sunk hours into as a kid. And in case it wasn't obvious by this point, I'm a huge fan to this day. Anytime I pick up an entry, I know that I'm setting myself up for a great time. They managed to strike a perfect balance of being easy to understand, while also being complex or challenging enough to be engaging. Like, I'm a complete newbie when it comes to turn-based strategy and traditional role-playing games, but all you've got to do is slap Mario's chops on it and dumb the mechanics down a little, and that's more than enough to get me to check it out.
Consumer loyalty sure is a bitch.
But above anything else, they're just fun. Mario has an insane track record when it comes to the quality of his games. I mean, there are over 20 games in the main series, and that's before getting into spin-offs like Mario Kart and Paper Mario, and every single one of them could easily be considered one of the absolute best games on their respective system, if not of all time.
Now, I covered a lot of the origins of the Mario character in my last video, which you should totally watch if you haven't already, but I'll quickly go over it again just to get us up to speed.
In the sacred land of Japan, Shigeru Miyamoto, an employee at Nintendo, co-developed the 1981 arcade game Donkey Kong. It was a tremendous success, owing largely to its simple arcadey gameplay and endearing characters, not least its protagonist. This sprightly little chap adorned in a red hat and dungarees, appropriately named Jumpman. Eventually though, Miyamoto came to his senses and gave the character a proper name. He considered the name Mr. Video before settling on Mario, after Mario Segale, an American real estate developer who was renting out a property to Nintendo at the time. Just look at this character design. He doesn't exactly scream heroic to me. Something about his hunched over posture, his squinty and cunning expression, his strangely villainous moustache, he just doesn't sit right with me. He kind of reminds me of Dick Dastardly, and if you think that's a dated reference to make, well, you're the one that clicked on a video of a 23-year-old talking about 40-year-old video games, so the bar's already been set pretty fucking low. Either way, I think Nintendo cottoned on to Mario's dodgy design, because in the next game, Donkey Kong Jr., he was instead depicted as the bad guy, kidnapping the saintly simian and holding him in a cage. He would change alignment again in the arcade game Mario Bros, serving not only as the first entry in the Mario franchise, but also fleshing out the character tremendously. This game established Mario as a plumber who travels through green pipes, collects coins and scraps with turtles, while also introducing a new character, his green-garbed twin brother Luigi. Now, while I may consider this game to be, well, fucking rubbish, it did at least provide a solid foundation for the series to build upon, which they did in the next game in spades. Super Mario Bros. If any video game has earned the label of iconic, it's this one. Primarily designed by Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka, leading a team of 5 further Nintendo employees, this is the game that transformed the titular character from a morally ambiguous ape-hating gremlin to a lovable and heroic icon of the video game industry. It was released on Nintendo's Japanese home console, the Famicom, in September 1985, and a month later as a launch title for the Western counterpart, the Nintendo Entertainment System. The NES had a fucking weird launch now that I think about it. A slew of shitty sports titles, a handful of shooters that utilised an actual gun, that's baller as hell, and even a couple of games that you needed a toy robot to play for some reason. And yet, despite this mountain of mediocrity, there were also some major standout titles. The NES launch gave us such iconic and enduring titles as Ice Climber, Excitebike, and Kung Fu. Certainly games of dubious quality nowadays, but for 1985, these were incredible. But at the heart of it all was Super Mario Bros.
This game was so synonymous with the console, in fact, that it was typically bundled alongside it, often as part of a double cartridge with the game Duck Hunt, a shooting game that I feel like I need to be careful with whenever I say the name out loud, but I digress.
The story is practically non-existent, and none of it is actually included in the game itself. If you want to get any kind of story out of this game, then you're going to have to check the manual, which basically reads as follows. The game takes place in the Mushroom Kingdom, a realm inhabited by these freaky little mushroom men that would later be established as the character Toad. One day, the kingdom is invaded by an army known as the Koopa Troop, led by a giant turtle-dragon hybrid named Bowser. Bowser uses his dark magic to transform the kingdom residents into brick blocks, a piece of trivia that carries some pretty disturbing implications considering you spend 90% of the game smashing them. The only person who can reverse the magic is Princess Peach, or as she was named in the English localization, Princess Toadstool. The Mushroom Monarch has been kidnapped by the Koopa Troop, and that's where you come in. Your only real objective is to travel across the Mushroom Kingdom to rescue the princess and save the kingdom in the process. Now, this story is laughably bare bones and inconsequential, but I don't really have much of an issue with this. I'm never much of one to focus on a story in a video game anyway, let alone one as old as this, and it's fairly obvious that this wasn't Miyamoto's priority either. No, Miyamoto's only real priority was to expand upon the foundation laid out in games such as Donkey Kong, Excitebike, and Kung Fu. He had already popularised the platformer genre on a basic level with the former title, and helped to establish the side-scrolling format in the latter two, so I guess you could view this game as the culmination of his career up to that point.
And on that note, I think it's about time we actually got into the game itself. So let's boot up the title screen, hit start, and... my life's all downhill from here, isn't it?
Right off the bat, this game lays out all of its cards flawlessly. As you can see, Super Mario Bros. Is a 2D platformer in which you travel to the right of the screen, but never the left, that's very important, collect coins and power-ups, and avoid hazards in order to reach the flagpole at the end of the level. There are 8 worlds, each containing 4 levels for an overall total of 32, and each containing a boss level at the end in which you need to defeat Bowser in order to ultimately rescue the princess. The first thing I have to address here is probably the first thing you'll notice as well, and that's the music. I mean, it's the Super Mario Bros. Theme. Everybody's heard it, everybody knows it, it's absolutely perfect. In fact, the soundtrack as a whole is great stuff. There are only 4 tracks in this game, but they're all incredibly catchy and memorable. Major kudos to composer Koji Kondo. They may be short and repetitive, but they're too damn good to ever become annoying. At first glance, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what makes this game so special when compared to other side-scrollers. It wasn't the first game to incorporate smooth side-scrolling of this nature. There were arcade games such as Jump Bug, Moon Patrol and Jungle Hunt that predated it by about 3 to 4 years, but you could say that it was the first game to get it this right. The first and most significant thing that set this game apart was its advanced control scheme. Mario will walk through the level at an average pace normally, but if you hold down the B button while you move, you'll break into a run that also allows you to jump further. If you let go of the D-pad while moving, you'll maintain a little bit of momentum and take a couple more steps as you slow down. Most importantly though, you could actually control Mario's jump mid-air. Most games at the time locked you into an arc whenever you jumped, which made precise platforming a bit of a pain in the arse. Here, any subtle tap of the D-pad steers Mario in that direction, and it feels great. Mario had actual physics to him. When you control Mario in this game, it feels like you're controlling an actual person, especially when compared to the jarring lack of momentum that other games had.
Now, I will admit that by today's standards, the controls may feel a little bit stiff and restrictive, especially when compared to later games in the series, but I still think they work very well overall. They managed to hit that sweet spot of being easy to learn but difficult to master, and they do work very well with the game's level design.
You know, on the subject of level design, World 1-1 just might be the best designed level in video game history. Miyamoto deliberately designed this level to ease new players into the mechanics of the game, and he couldn't have possibly done a better job. Even with a scenario as simple as these blocks, this Goomba, and this pipe, it teaches you that different things come out of different blocks, since you get a coin out of this one and a super mushroom out of this one. It teaches you that some entities should be collected and some should be avoided, as is the case with this Goomba. It teaches you that jumping on enemies is an optimal way to kill them, and it even teaches you that objects interact with their environment by deliberately placing this pipe in such a place that the mushroom will bounce off of it. And this is just the first screen of the game. Throughout the rest of the level, you'll encounter different enemies, you'll see all the power-ups included in the game, and you can even find a couple of secrets here and there.
There's a whole ass lesson on gameplay mechanics in just this one level, and we're only just starting. If this isn't the best tutorial level in video game history, I don't know what is.
Thankfully, it's not as though the game blows its load with level design too early, as the rest of the levels are also top-notch and way ahead of their time. They're all densely packed with plenty of enemies to stomp on, coins to collect, and secrets to find. What's even better though is that they're constructed in such a way that you can play the game at whatever pace you want to. If you want to speed through the levels, exploration be damned, then you're able to do so. If you want to take your time to see if you can discover a secret here and there, then by all means, the sky's the limit. Almost every level in the game has something to discover, something to see or do that makes repeat visits an absolute treat. Hidden blocks, pipes that lead to areas filled with coins, and of course, warp zones. These things are fucking awesome. Just head down a pipe and you'll be transported to a later world in the game, which is a great way to regain your progress if you get a game over. The level themes in this game are quite interesting and offer some good variety. There are the iconic Overworld stages, underground caves, athletic treetop and mushroom stages that really test your platforming abilities, underwater stages where you need to swim in order to avoid enemies, bridge levels where you're assaulted by flying fish. You know, it's impressive how this game manages to give each level a unique feel, even in spite of its primitive visuals. Graphically, this game holds up decently for an early NES title, and while it is fairly rudimentary and blocky, everything is visually distinct enough to stand out against each other, and that's really what matters most. It's simple, but it gets the job done fine. Every world is capped off with a hazardous castle stage, and these places don't fuck around. You'll be dodging fireballs left and right, constantly stopping and starting so you can pass through without getting burned, and of course culminating in a battle with Bowser himself. If you defeat Bowser, you'll head into the back room and be greeted by Toad, standing there with his middle fingers raised proudly to the sky and uttering the iconic words, "Thank you, Mario, but the princess is in another castle."
This is probably the most frustrating and infamous aspect of the game right here. This smug little prick passively aggressively telling you that you've basically just wasted your time and that you could have been off elsewhere doing what you initially set out to be doing in the first place. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's just kind of insulting.
If I were to fault the game for anything in terms of level design, it would be that it isn't exactly shy of reusing levels for the sake of padding. World 5-3 is the same as 1-3, just with smaller platforms and bullet bills. 7-2 is the same as 2-2, just with extra bloopers and cheap-cheeps. I could complain about this, but this game came out in a time where having more than, 4 levels was fucking mind-blowing, so a little bit of recycling here and there isn't too much of an issue. The levels in this game grow exponentially more difficult as you progress, and I'd say that the difficulty curve is pretty spot on. Some parts can be fairly tough, and I'm not sure I would necessarily call this game easy, but it never presents you with any ludicrous bullshit. It doesn't spam you with projectiles that you can't dodge, or jumps that are impossible to make, or any of that stuff. It's challenging but fair, just as a good game should be. The only parts of the game that can be kind of frustrating are the repeating castles in which you need to take the correct path to progress. Probably the only time in the game where the time limit plays an actual role, but even these can be beaten with a little bit of trial and error. The game does fall victim to that classic lose all your lives and you're taken back to the beginning mentality that plagued the 8-bit era, but quite honestly, it's so short and brisk that this isn't too much of an issue. It shouldn't take you longer than an hour to beat this game. Hell, if you abuse warp zones, it shouldn't take you longer than 10 minutes. Your main method of attack is to utilise Mario's impressive girth to crush enemies by jumping on them. Now, while he's certainly capable of taking out enemies, Mario is, well, he's fragile as hell. He can't exactly take a beating. In fact, all it takes is for him to walk into an enemy or fall into a pit, and that's enough to send him to an early grave. That's kind of pathetic, not gonna lie. And this is where the power-ups come into play. items that you can find throughout the game that give Mario extra protection or even special abilities. The most basic is the Super Mushroom, which turns Mario into Super Mario. You get an extra hit and you're twice as tall.
Yeah, pretty fucking super if you ask me.
Actually, the instruction manual refers to these as magic mushrooms, and I feel like I could make a juvenile joke about this, but there are plenty of webcomics and fan art that have already done that for me, so I'll spare myself the effort. If you cause a magic mushroom to spawn while already transformed into Super Mario though, you'll get the Fire Flower instead, giving you the ability to shoot fireballs that will take out enemies that can't be jumped on, or just give you an easier time dealing with other enemies. Well, don't worry, I'll get to you, you little shit. The Starman turns Mario invincible for a brief period of time, and the 1-up mushroom is exactly what it sounds like. A 1-up. Collect one of these and you'll get an extra life. They're quite scarce and mostly hidden, but you can also get an extra life by collecting 100 coins, so it's nice that you have the option. Now, power-ups have become a staple in the Mario series. I mean, at this point there are literally dozens of the things, but for the first game in the series, these are pretty good. They add just enough variety to the gameplay to make them worthwhile, and they're pretty fun to use. But of course, you can't have good power-ups without good enemies, and thankfully Super Mario Bros. Is full of them. Every single one of them manages to be unique and provide their own form of threat against you. The first, and easily most common, is the iconic Goomba, which, fun fact, I think that's a slur against Italian Americans, so good job Nintendo. Anyway, Goombas do nothing but menacingly walk towards you, and while that may sound pathetic, okay, it kind of is, but still, they serve as a great basic enemy. Koopa Troopers, making their return from the arcade game, can be a little bit trickier, since their shell will slide across the ground and damage you, but on the plus side, they'll also damage other enemies. This is just a fun mechanic to mess around with, I like it a lot. Koopas come in 2 different flavours. Green Koopas will happily march off of any nearby cliff, whereas red Koopas are a bit more cautious than their suicidal brethren. Oh yeah, and there are also Koopa Paratroopers. They're just Koopas with wings. Piranha plants come out of pipes to take a chomp out of you, but they won't come out of a pipe if you're standing on top of it, so they do kind of fail the you had one fucking job test, but at least they made for a great Smash Bros character. Cheep Cheeps and Bloopers are basic fish enemies, kind of annoying since you can't jump on them, but fair enough. Lakitus float above the stage and constantly shower you with Spinies, these obnoxious little pricks that you can't jump on. Buzzy Beetles are basically Koopas that are immune to fire, nothing much to say there, and Bullet Bills shoot out of cannons horizontally, basically controlling the entire area that they shoot in. Very fun to platform with.
There is just one more enemy to talk about, and I've been saving this one for last.
An enemy so annoying and difficult to get around, it's terrifying. An enemy that haunts the memory of anybody who's played this game. A threat like no other, the Hammer Brother. These pricks slowly pace back and forth and erratically throw hammers at you, sometimes 1, sometimes 3, but always controlling the whole area in front of them. Without a Fire Flower, you need patience and skill to get around them, but what's most annoying about them is that they mostly seem to come in pairs. Christ, I hate these fucking things, they're such assholes. Hell, I'd go as far to say that the Hammer Bros pose a bigger threat than Bowser. Now, he may look intimidating, but he's honestly not too bad, mostly because there are a couple of different ways to take him out. The first, and easiest, is to pelt him with fireballs until he dies, but the second is to either jump over him or run under him and hit this axe, knocking the bridge out from underneath him.
Okay, this is a simple enough and iconic setup, but the game manages to cock it up with just one major oversight. Damage boost.
If you enter a Bowser battle as anything other than Small Mario, you've already won. Simply walk into him and take damage, rendering you invincible until you reach the axe. Now, I know that expecting this game to have 8 unique bosses might be a bit much considering that this was one of the earliest side-scrollers to incorporate this many levels. Like, it's impressive that this game has boss fights in the first place. And I do appreciate that every boss fight builds upon the previous one by altering either the terrain or Bowser's moveset, starting out with just Fire Breath but eventually getting hammers as well. At the same time though, being able to damage boost does trivialise what should be the most intimidating moments in the game, especially considering that most levels have a mushroom fairly close to the beginning anyway. On the other hand, being able to beat Bowser as Small Mario feels absolutely fantastic. Getting to the end of the 8th castle on your last life, dodging this knobhead one last time, and perfectly weaving through to hit the axe at the end, it's fucking beautiful, man. With Bowser defeated, you finally make your way to the princess, and so, as quickly as it began, you've beaten Super Mario Bros. What an adventure.
You know, looking at this game when compared to the rest of the franchise, it's very impressive how well it manages to hold up on its own merits. Like, would I consider it one of my favourite games in the series? Probably not, but still, for the first entry, it's very well made.
It's obvious that Mario has been in a lot of games, and it's even more obvious that most of those games are bloody outstanding. But Super Mario Bros. Still manages to hold up as a fun title. It may not be the most polished or fleshed out entry in the series, but it also has some of the most memorable level designs, the most iconic music, and just enough depth to its gameplay to feel rewarding overall. Everything about this game radiates pure charm to me, from the simplicity of its presentation to the straightforward fun factor of its gameplay. It's just all around great platforming. Is it something that you should play for yourselves?
Yes, absolutely. You haven't played this game? What the hell's wrong with you?
This game has aged like a fine wine, and if you have even the slightest interest in the history of video games, you owe it to yourself to give it a go. Like, not only did it lay the foundation for the Mario series, it also helped to establish the video game medium as we know it today. I mean, think about it. This game was released on the same day and console as Gyromite, Duck Hunt, Ice Climber, you know, really basic and kind of shallow games in hindsight. But you went into Super Mario Bros. With an end goal, an iconic character you could connect to, a tyrannical opponent that you wanted to defeat, a princess you wanted to save. You couldn't give less of a toss about getting a high score. I mean, that's such a pointless part of the game that I didn't even bother mentioning it earlier. This game took players on an actual adventure. Without it, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are nowadays. The game was an astronomical commercial success, and to this day, it's still one of the top 10 best-selling games in history through its numerous remakes and re-releases, such as Super Mario All-Stars for the Super Nintendo, or Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for the Game Boy Color, or even a direct upload of the original game to the now-defunct Virtual Console on the Wii, Wii U and 3DS. If you want to play it nowadays, then it's available through the Nintendo Switch Online service, and I highly recommend that you do so. Just fucking play it, please. Nearly 40 years later, and it's just as much fun to play now as it was back then. Not that I would have known back then, because I wasn't fucking born for about 15 years after this game came out, but it's a figure of speech. This game holds up fucking brilliant. It's so good.
Yeah, I think by this point it's probably pretty obvious that I'm a bit of a sycophant for this franchise. But, you know, fanboy bias aside, I still think my point stands. The amount of stuff that this game introduces, not just for the franchise, but the medium of video games as a whole, is absolutely staggering. So, you know, call me a fanboy all you want, I don't really care. I can't get enough of it. And that's a pretty good thing as well, because there's a lot more Mario where that came from. Next time, I can't wait for this, we are going to be looking at one of my favourite games of all time, Super Mario Bros. 2, which, yeah, I can't wait. So, until next time everybody, signing out.